Archaeologists analyzed in the laboratories fragments from ancient altars covered by sandstorms and or volcanic ash. A surprising result caught my attention. Along with the fragments of the sacrifices, which sometimes also contained human remains, there were traces of plants with psychoactive effects. In fact, traces of drugs. The smoke of these plants produced an euphoria to those present, which they believed was due to the goodwill of the gods. The priests lied on purpose, while breathing the smoke from the altar installed addiction. Gradually, the repeated return to these altars brought enormous financial income to the priests. Nothing new. And today, drugs offer the illusion of getting rid of problems, promise a false state of well-being, install addiction, and begin the gradual destruction of the body and irrevocably the mind. Drugs destroy lives and ruin families. Welcome to our presentation, Steps in Recovery. I am MargiAnne Isaia, and I have the joy of having with me in the Loma Linda Springs studio my former co-worker, Marissa Partee. Welcome back, Marissa.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Marissa Partee is an addiction counselor and a behavioral health specialist. She had a lot of experience working in recovery. We talked about case management, the role of addiction counselor in the recovery process. And we talk about relapse as a part of the recovery process. What I would like, we talk about the 12 steps involvement for our clients. What I would like today to talk will be about the family involvement in creating the addiction, and also the family dynamic, family involvement in recovery. Tell me something about the family dynamic when one of its members develops an addiction.
So when it comes to the family dynamic of addiction, I think it's really important to remind ourselves that addiction is considered a family disease. It impacts the family unit entirely. I know it's very easy, and many are quick to cast a lot of focus on the addict and the individual. Their erratic behaviors, and we start to just feel unsafe with the individual. But I think it's also important to recognize that the family dynamic is vital to this whole situation. So what I see happening in a dynamic of addiction is that the family members over time actually start to shift their style towards their loved one, and they surprisingly accommodate their addiction. A lot of times we see enabling, we see a lot of roles of what we see in codependency. There's the scapegoat, which happens to also be the addict. So there's very common roles we see in these dynamics with addiction being present. And it's very vital for every member to be involved in the recovery process.
Yeah, and while preparing for these presentations, I realized that family, I might say the majority of the time, is in denial of their need of change. Everything is put on the addict, and this is why the statistics are disappointing, because we try to invest so much in therapy on the client, and we miss the family, right? Because the family is no, we are a happy family and have the mask, and now here we discover. If you remember a particular significant example from your experience about how the family was like acknowledging after a while and then saying, wow.
I feel very fortunate in all the different styles and opportunities I've been able to work with addiction and those that are battling addiction. I've worked with the individual themselves without the family dynamic. Those rates were poor. I worked with companies that were oriented around the family, those rates were higher. So differentiating between the two experiences that I've had, I recognize that involving the family in the process of recovery is very significant to everyone's success. I know that it's very common for the family to hyper-focus on the individual they're concerned about. Those maladaptive behaviors are more prominent. We can point at them and call them out. And it's harder to recognize what we're doing to contribute to some of that. So I think getting help for everybody in that dynamic can be very powerful because it gives them a chance to get education and knowledge about their own characteristics that might be connected or that might be influencing our loved one's addiction. So it just amplifies everybody's success. We learn how to be more of a support system to them while working on ourselves, so we're not pushing that pressure on that individual, because in time, as they work on themselves, it's sooner than later that they recognize, I'm not the only one that has these issues in my family. So with somebody that's working with the family, I just see it very beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, I remember mother pushing, let's have family therapy. A situation, if you remember, when parents say, we really want to come there, have some help. What would you tell them? Because the therapist said, I won't, Marissa, I won't answer to this person. I'll let you deal with this.
I think those moments when you're working with a family and you see how invasive they can become and the lack of boundaries they possess and respect on other people, that's enough insight to recognize they're going to need some guidance and some support in these type of issues too. But making sure you have those firm boundaries and you start showing them and you get that practicing going about, this is what I can offer, this is my availability, and that's all I can do. But practicing that with them at that state is really helpful, because then they'll in time recognize, I am pushing it a little further than I need to, and that's a window for change,
Yeah, boundaries.
Yeah.
Because you will see that due to missing boundaries in the family, everything was so enmeshed, and they use each other as emotional support instead of standing nice and tall by themselves and then growing together instead of making miserable each other.
Yes, and that reminds me of what I know we've talked a lot about before in the past, is allowing our family members to struggle safely. I think it's very powerful to allow them to struggle, especially if they're in treatment already. They're with professionals. They're in the right setting to struggle. So, of course, if they're away from home, they will make those calls about wanting to go home, not needing to be there. And they will start talking their family members into bringing them back home. And it's very important that you respect the recovery process that's occurring, because what you can do is do more harm by bringing them back home and unraveling the work that's getting done. If anything, they're being challenged and they're uncomfortable, but that's where growth is. That's where growth starts.
I remember a particular client, when he didn't and he called mother. Mother said, okay, I will send your brother to take you home, and everything was ruined. And then the guy came back after relapsing. Family is so important, because again we come to the social model. You develop in a social context. There are the deficits of the family, but it's important for us to work with the family. We need a family support. And this is the point of trying to evaluate what are the strengths, and we might move forward in discussing about when we evaluate the family, what kind of strengths you are looking for, because family is a very important part of our team. Family is part of our team.
It is. They are part of the treatment team, because if they're not on board with what we're doing in treatment, it works against us, It feeds into that enabling. So it's very important to recognize what strengths are within the family already, to utilize that. So we think about like our plan of treatment. We always want to go based off strengths. We want to know how to use what the client already has, especially within the family. So core strengths I love seeing is resiliency being one of them. I love seeing that they're family based, that they have that love for each other. I like to see openness, right? So that I know that things that I may suggest, they may be more willing to explore. And I like to see just support, knowing that they're willing to support each other. Even if it was unhealthy at some point, the fact that they were able to support, that is a strength, right? So let's shift it more in a healthier approach.
Yeah, I'm coming with a clinical case. The client's parents are divorced. It was a conflicting situation. He said, I started using because of the divorce. Now he's in recovery. And what we can do when parents are still fighting on something, in the same time they think, hey, we need to do something to help this client.
When we see those cases, Margie, I think we've talked about it a few times. It can be a conflict of interest if they bring in their own issues between them while trying to also work on that family dynamic. So we like that they get individual therapy outside of what is getting worked on a treatment for the addict that's receiving services.
Yeah, and again, coming to experience, there are parents who wanted to get involved in therapy, but they wanted to have family therapy. And how is this?
I like to identify that as a slippery slope. It's just very dangerous. You know, we have laws and ethics now involved in a lot of the treatment approaches we have. So we have to make sure that we are abiding by that and separating, you know, things we're going through and goals we have.
Yeah, and I said, if as a team we might see there are some particulars, this is a divorced family, but if we might work separately with parents and then bring together to understand the need for them to get co-parenting prior to coming to therapy. There were successes.
Yes, so it has to be a separated approach that ultimately will come together in the end, but it has to be separated. Otherwise, there's too much of a conflict of interest between the two issues.
I remember a client, I know, maybe you know him. I have to have family-involved therapy with mom and client, family-involved therapy with father and client. I have the chance to see them in person and to see the family dynamic. And I was surprised to see that client, after 4 months of therapy, was more mature than either parent. And he said, I'm going back home, continue college education. I won't stay with mom, I won't stay with dad, I'll have my own place.
Healthy decision making, and we see that too in a lot of dynamics. The emotional state and the maturity state of some of the parents, it happens. We see them raising children, and those children, for whatever reason, maybe more other protective factors in place, they do advance in their maturity and they are able to bypass where their parents are. And I love seeing that because for me it's breaking generational patterns that may be occurring.
This is for American culture. Now coming to Romanian culture and Mexican culture or Latina-based culture, parents want their kids come home, back home. What do you say? What would you tell people like this? Because we have extra space, we have plenty of room.
I call that again another slippery slope. You're going to jeopardize what that person's autonomy can reach. You know, if they have the ability to live independently and experience life at a different level, we should culture that. I think what happens is the enabling, and then it's fear-based. You know, but we need to allow these individuals, if they have willingness to reach that level in life, we should be supportive and we should cultivate that rather than feel like they need to stay with us and we need to keep them safe. That's unhealthy.
Yeah, And again, they might say, it's better for him to stay with us, who might be more helpful.
It does more harm than help.
Yeah.
Because what happens is it's like learned handicapping. They aren't able to reach milestones at the age that they should be. So from 18 on, they should be exploring life a little bit so that they have a better understanding as they grow older.
It will be interesting that if we will be in Romania and do this recording addressing people, parents, they might say, oh, it's difficult for him because there are financial issues, we need to help him.
And yeah, I can see that, but that still does more harm.
Yes.
Because that builds another dependence. When are they going to be able to then be sufficient and in a place to take over those things? That practice is necessary. It's early intervention. It's helping them in an early time to really get those things down as they become an adult.
And it seems like we need to break this culture, because it's not about culture benefiting to them, and they need to know science is science, and family science said, let them be themselves.
Yes. Yeah, so that way they're successful reaching the milestone of when the role starts reverse, and they should be in a position now taking care of their parents, right? Having an extra room for their parents. That process will prolong the support their parents are going to need.
Yeah. There are families when they depend emotionally on each others. And we said group involvement for the client is very helpful, is recommended, is working.
Yes.
What about family attending their own group support?
I love family support groups. It's a great opportunity to get insight that you may not get from just your normal style of group as the individual.
What do you mean by this?
So, I see higher rates of success for those that have family involved in their recovery process who also are attending the opportunity for family support groups. There's a lot of different insight to gain in a setting like that. You're hearing different members share their story. You're hearing even the addicts share what it's like to deal with some of those situations from their family members and their stories. And then we have facilitators that are also able to share knowledge and education on both parties. And I think it's just a great opportunity to be involved in the recovery process for everybody. Very informative.
We have here in the United States Al-Anon.
Al-Anon is a great one. I know that even like my local county sector, we offer a lot of them too, because we like to see the families involved. And the feedback that I get for those that participate, it's amazing. They might be resistant and feel like, why do I need to go? I'm not the problem. They end up going and they have a great experience and they get information they would have never thought they could get. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I imagine how people listening to stories, they start thinking, because education is power. And then you start internalizing what you learn and say, hey, I never thought of me being such a codependent mother.
And also the feeling of not being alone. You hear other people share their remorse and the insight they're recognizing, and there's a comforting feeling knowing like, oh man, I am not the only one that feels like that, as the mom, as the sister, as whoever that person is in our life that we're trying to help. Very comforting.
Sharing the burdens. I wish in the churches in Romania might be something like this, because I noticed somewhere in the desert area they have codependent anonymous. Every day, if you want to attend a group, you'll find one in the morning and afternoon. And I was like, wow, interesting.
Even virtually, you'll find one every hour, which makes you recognize how prevalent codependency is. They have something available every hour for somebody to join. And it's very powerful. I know that when I've attended in support or I've shared it, it's a reminder how a lot of habits that we're seeing, it's very codependent behavior.
And it might be at least have once per week in person and then have online, because there are some minuses when you are online. If you can mention something like this.
I'm always pro and con about virtual meetings. I pro because it's convenient, right? It's accessible at our fingertips. So there's no excuse I couldn't attend a meeting because, right? We have it on our phone. Some of the disadvantage of it is you really aren't pressured in a sense compared to being in person to share something, to interact, you know? You're more than likely to turn off a camera and just be a fly on the wall, you know, which you're not going to get as much out of it if you're just there, right? So being in person is more powerful because you're involved in the physical interaction, and there is more of a sense of, okay, I feel like I should talk, or you get that feeling like I should speak, and you have more of that opportunity than compared to a meeting, because it can get really flooded in there online.
Yeah, and I remember people saying, struggling with being there and sharing, but once they started sharing, they realized how much it was helping others, and they received the feedback, and they say, hey, this is it's like a family.
It does become a family, and I think it's because of that validation part of it, you know. A lot of these people, they go into those rooms and they've never felt heard before. They never felt like they've been supported. They feel very alone. They have a moment where they're compelled or inspired. We like to see it as a spiritual moment, you know. It's your time to speak, because you never know who's in there that needs to hear it, right? So what happens is we see that occur. Somebody speaks up, they're very transparent, they utilize that moment. After the meeting, there are multiple people that you will witness go up to those people that shared to thank them. And it's powerful because then they feel validated. Okay, I needed to say that.
This is sort of spiritual experience.
It is a spiritual experience.
It's like an act of worship. Hey, we are here connected. We are on the same family, and we help each other.
Yes.
Yeah. Going forward with education, any need for educating family about how they might get involved in order to prevent the relapse?
Oh, please. Yes. More people involved in relapse prevention and that dynamic, the better success that person will be safe if a crisis occurs. A relapse prevention plan, it's vital, it's necessary, and it's a live document that can always be adjusted, right? So it's really important to have a game plan, something structured that you can reference when there's a crisis, because when a crisis happens, it's hard to think clearly about what to do. It's hard to be like, this seems rational, this is the next step. Even for family members, because of the fear and the, you know, the trauma that's occurring or has occurred. So them being a part of the relapse prevention plan will really help guide that individual when a crisis occurs. And there's a lot of things coming out. So where I'm at now, we're creating an app specifically for relapse prevention. So that way it's at the consumer's fingertips, right? If there's something people always have, it's their phone. So we're learning how to create an app so that way they have a panic button and it brings everything down, and the family members will be able to be connected to it too.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I just learned about that recently.
Wow, no excuse, you didn't know what to do. Something like relapse happened while the client is in the program, in recovery. Now, I experienced a situation when the client is supposed to call the family.
Yes.
Some experience with this. I wasn't aware of this, and I called the family to tell. And I was told, no, the client needs to tell them. What's the point of this?
I think the purpose behind that approach was to allow the client to learn how to practice more integrity. That is one of the principles of the 12-step program, is having integrity. So teaching them how to do that and sitting with them in that process to have more integrity. Let your loved one know, hey, this happened and I need help. Does it happen that way? not necessarily, right? Because a lot of the times the clients are stuck in old behaviors, so they're going to do what they know, which is lie, manipulate, deny, gaslight you, make you seem like, no, you're the one that has the issues.
Come with excuses.
Yes, that's more common than that person off the bat calling their loved one, being very transparent, letting them know, I realized I need more help than I may want to admit. But it gives them that chance to start practicing that, because how else are they going to do that without starting to practice? So that's why that approach was taken, I believe, in that instance. So it gives the client the power in their hands, respects their autonomy, right? They're capable of making a call. They're capable of admitting some truth. So it's really enhancing their autonomy. They're capable of it.
And is their choice when to inform the parents? Because I experienced situation when they'll say, you have to call and let them know, or I might say, when you are prepared,
yes,
let them know, but then explain how things got to there. What do you think about?
I think it's really hard to make it one way. It's not a black and white approach. Yes. It is going to differ from case to case, right? And I think there's a nudge towards letting them know immediately, only because there's a process that follows it after. And a lot of times we want to get that process going sooner than later because it's more effective. But then again, pushing that client to just tell, you can do more harm too. You can break that rapport that you have with the client, where they feel like, now I'm against you and you're against me and you're on my parent's side. And then it's really, really hard to get through to them for some time until that rapport, can be rebuilt. So it's going to differ. You're going to have to use your skills to know, like, is this going to do more harm to my client and our rapport? Can I support them and maybe prepare them for that talk with their parents? And that I always have to fill out. And in that moment, I'll know, okay, I'm going to take some time and we're gonna do this together. I'm going to help you kind of talk about how to share that information. Or I feel like it's going to be beneficial to go ahead and challenge them. We'll go the route where they're going to, just see how they can be transparent and have integrity.
Yeah, we need to stop here. We'll continue. Thank you so much, Marissa.
No problem.
Yeah, it was a lot of insight.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
We are glad that you followed our dialogue today. On our part, it was a way of extending a helping hand to those who listen to us, presenting recovery as a serious, logical, scientific, and a very possible action if it is followed step by step. Do not despair. There is hope for you. I am MargiAnne Isaia, and together with Marissa Partee, we invite you to our future shows.